CNBC has been hit by a ton of criticism since last night. Pretty much everyone on the right, every conservative saying that they were unfair to their candidates, they were biased, they didn't control the debate, they wore ugly suits, they were the worst. And so we're going to go through a lot of these because there was a lot of criticism. First, from Reince Priebus, the Republican National Committee chairman, our diverse field of talented and exceptionally qualified candidates did their best to share ideas for how to reinvigorate the economy and put Americans back to work despite deeply unfortunate questioning. And that's true. They did their best. Unfortunately, they did not actually share any good ideas. He said CNBC should be ashamed of how this debate was handled. Ashamed. Even worse than Fox, perhaps, who they criticized in the same way. Jeb Bush. They didn't control the debate, plain and simple. It was not a fair debate in that regard. There were gotcha questions like there had been in the other debates as well, so he wasn't happy. Let's see. We've got a little bit of Donald Trump here, but why don't we actually go to video 2. You're going to see Donald Trump. This is immediately after the debate doing some complaining of his own.
Well, I thought that if you looked at Hillary's deal a couple of weeks ago, the questions were much softer, much easier, much nicer. It was like a giant love fest. That did not take place over here. This was pretty tough. But I would say that, you know, that's the way you want it to go. But Hillary's questions were certainly a lot easier than the questions we were given tonight. I can tell you that that was actually quite boring. I think this was more exciting. But these were much tougher questions.
I mean, look, we criticized early on some of the early questions of the Democratic debate. But even then, it wasn't like they were gotcha questions. Our criticism wasn't that the questions were wrong. It was that they stood in stark contrast to the sorts of questions, aside from Megyn Kelly, that have been asked at the first 2 Republican debates. And I don't think that overall they were soft. I mean, they asked Lincoln Chafee, what the fuck are you doing on that stage? They asked Bernie Sanders, how can you possibly say you're a socialist? That's really scary. Why shouldn't people be terrified of how you're going to destroy this country? And things like that, that you're way out of step with guns. Why shouldn't everybody be worried about your gun policy? They were hard. The things, we're going to go to some of the things that they asked the Republicans at last night's debate, but like bringing up the attack on Marco Rubio, which we're going to talk about, like he didn't really even have to answer it. So it's ironic, from my point of view, to complain about hard questioning when you're allowed to simply not answer it and then go and whine to the press and say that they were unfair.
I agree. I mean, what kind of hard question would you want? So, hey, Ben Carson, do you want a B12 shot or maybe some espresso? Well, that would be a good question. Or, you know, I mean, I thought that they were, okay, I can't remember the phrasing, but they really do treat Donald Trump like a clown, and he doesn't really like it too much anymore.
Oh, they said the comic book presidency.
Right.
Is that what you were talking about?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
You know,
they do treat him like a clown.
They do. They do. I know, but it's like, again, a little more substance I would have appreciated.
Yes, the problem at the debate, Johnny, was it was the hard questions from the corporate news reporters on CNBC, the lapdogs of corporations in Wall Street. They gave the Republicans too many tough... Yeah, that was the problem. It's the moderators. It's not the crazy... lie-spewing, hate-mongering GOP candidates. That's not the problem. No, the problem was the moderators were too tough. So now they hated Fox News. To Donald Trump,
Fox News, not conservative enough.
For weeks, he went on a tirade against Megyn Kelly for being too tough and asking gotcha questions. And and now on CNBC also too tough a question. So anywhere they go,
the business network.
They just don't like questions.
They're deeply conservative.
Yeah, they're like, oh, the questions were too. They were asking gotcha questions, also known as questions.
Yeah, a gotcha question like your tax plan. Conservative think tanks have said it's going to cost us $9 billion or $9 trillion over 10 years. Excuse me. How could you possibly fund the government? Well. This seems unfair to me. Yeah, it seems unfair that you would try to run the country by bankrupting it. That seems unfair. That's the big problem from my point of view. Let's run through a couple of these other complaints, though. We're going to look up the front page of Drudge Report, Shame of the Nation. So they were very clear there. Those 3 individuals, by the way, they blocked out the audience.
Is he talking about Drudge Report?
That's true. He is identified. That's their tagline. That's Drudge Report. Shame of the nation.
That's what I thought. Is that their tagline?
I don't think so.
It's like, yeah. Manson also did a thing. Murderers.
Exactly. Ben Carson says, well, I think they obviously had an agenda. And when I compare them to the kind of questions that were asked to the Democrats in their debate, the difference is night and day. So also thinking it was unfair.
Such fucking whining bitches.
Yeah.
Honest to God, you're such babies.
Here's why they're complaining, because they weren't asked, what would your Secret Service code name be?
Yeah.
Who would you put on the $10 bill?
Hey, what do you want to say to God?
Yeah, okay, it's
Trump
hard
is like,
by
I'm
that
right here, yes.
So, and in none of these debates has anyone asked Donald Trump one question about that thing on his head. Not one question.
Yeah.
No one has asked him about that. No one has they've asked him about all different kinds of things. No one will say a damn thing. And Rand Paul won't say anything about it either.
Because he has one on his head, too.
He also has a bird's nest on his head.
what's going on?
He suffers from perpetual bedhead syndrome.
That's you know what it is he has that. He's a big fisherman. And he also, that's fishing wire that he has as a Rand Paul. Just in case he has a 20-pound test and he has it curled up on his head.
Technically. Now, Fox and Friends, who they just experienced being on the other end of this criticism a month ago, a little bit more than a month ago, and yet they're already, and Fox and Friends, I understand, is already in the pocket of Donald Trump and that sort of person, but they're going to defend the candidates in this case and attack CNBC in this clip.
A number of people say you were one of the winners last night, but it seems universal. The big loser was CNBC. What kind of an agenda did they have going into that debate with you guys last night?
Yeah, I don't think it's atypical from what you see among most people in the mainstream media, which is, privately they believe they're smarter than the people running, and they can't wait for their chance to show off in front of their buddies by asking some question they think is going to embarrass, especially Republicans. I think the bigger frustration you saw is that all those candidates on the stage had prepared for a substantive debate. Everyone was ready to talk about trade policy and the debt and tax policies, and we were ready for that. Everybody was. And then you get questions like the ones everybody got, which were clearly designed to either get us to fight against each other or to say something embarrassing about each other, about us, and then ask us to react. And that's what the purpose of these questions were, and it became irritating.
We want to share with everybody a little bit of your response to those moderators and the mainstream bias. Senator, we asked our viewers to send in questions since the moderators did such a lousy job getting to the issues.
Well,
they just, please love us.
you.
Love us, please.
Poor Rubio.
Marco Rubio, he's not a millionaire. He's just a regular, everyday Joe who can't be bothered to show up for his $174,000 a year job.
Yeah. Well, why would he? He still gets paid if he doesn't. I hated everything that Rubio said there. I mean, he's such a little whiner. We were all prepared to talk about tax policy. What was unfair about the questions that they asked to Ben Carson? They said you want to set up a biblical tithing, or a system based on biblical tithing, to pay for the federal government. And they said, he said it's not 10%, and they were like, okay, fine, it's not 10%. He said 15. They said it would have to be 27. If it's a flat tax to pay for our current obligations, it needs to be 27. He wants to do about half of that, and then thinks, oh, well, I'm only down $800 billion on my estimates. He says he's down $800 billion in terms of being able to pay for government operations. And that's unfair. But I thought he was prepared. And then Marco Rubio, and I know that we're going to get to this a little bit later, but they said that you actually give a higher percentage improvement by taxes to those at the higher end of the tax spectrum. And he said, no, it's only when you do the absolute numbers. It's not the percentages. No, he was wrong. It's the percentages. He actually gives a bigger percentage cut to those who are making more. How is that unfair? And how are you prepared when you don't even know the difference between an absolute number and a percentage? I don't know what they expected to be asked. They were all prepared to have a substantive
you
policy
act like
discussion.
you think they're really sincere in their criticism of CNBC. Those were the fucking easiest questions they ever got. No, and they just ignored them when they felt like it, and they all bumped in when they felt like it. And the CNBC, they were shitty. I think they were shitty, but they were shitty in the opposite. They're way too soft. They're not new. Those aren't journalists. Those are people who put on makeup and sit in front of cameras like us.
Yeah, and they sit in front of the cameras on that network to defend and to defend businesses and to progress towards what the businesses want.
That's very true.
CNBC is there to support the power structure of America. It's not there. They're not a sharp stick in the eye of the powerful.
Yeah. And by the way, on both sides of that desk, those people are being paid by the people who run those businesses. How can you pretend that you have opposing interests when your paychecks come from the same office?
Yes.
Going back to Ben Carson, and I can do a really good Ben Carson impression, actually. Hold on. So, let me get the most deadpan face I can get. What would Jesus do? That's his tax plan right there, literally, in a nutshell.
Yes, you're right.
I mean, honestly, they went down the line. What do you want? A flat tax. What do you want? A flat tax. Why don't we just clump them all in one big wad and just make one big flat tax? I mean, there was no distinction between those tax plans except for his convoluted. I didn't get that either.
Yeah, and Trump's isn't technically a flat tax, but it would actually produce less tax revenue than Ben Carson's flat tax. Ted Cruz was on some sort of mission to prove that he would not take a single dollar in taxes. I mean, he says it would be something like a 10% flat tax for individuals, a 16% flat tax for corporations, and then you can kiss the entire country goodbye because that's $5.
Right.
But somehow he thinks he can run the country on it. And also, so you referred to that we can't elect people without this experience, and his references to the Bible. I saw a tweet from Ben Carson today, and you're totally right about both of those. He said in criticism, he's been getting this criticism that he's not qualified to be the presidency, which seems like the fairest criticism I've ever heard. And he tweeted out, bear in mind, the Ark was made by amateurs and the Titanic was made by professionals. Case closed. Drop your mic. We're ready to elect you to the highest office in the land.